Our next speaker is code 356. Right over here. Speaker 356 has chosen, "It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences," by Audre Lorde. It is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences, Audre Lorde.
Recently, there was an opening for the director of the local Kentucky Speech League position. And since no one could find a good candidate, I took it on behalf of myself to find the perfect candidate. Me. See, I'm fairly good at speech. I've done speech in the circuit for 3 years. I thought I'd make a great director. So I took the opportunity here at this tournament to try to convince each and every individual coach to vote for me as the next director. But they weren't exactly so open to the idea. I was met with questions like, how are you supposed to compete and run a tournament? And, oh my goodness, you're not joking, are you? But perhaps what this is, although they may not vote me in, is just a difference of opinion, one that we may actually be able to build into a stronger league and a stronger Kentucky. And perhaps that's exactly what today's quote is trying to say by Audre Lorde. It's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And what this quotation is trying to say is that if we can acknowledge our differences, we can make each other stronger. And we can see this through a variety of people throughout history. First, we can see this through quarterbacks Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. Secondly, we can see this through conqueror Alexander the Great. And finally, through former President George Washington. Now, my father was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which meant from a very early age I was forced to be a Green Bay Packer fan. And just to prove that, my parents right now are watching this on a TV, and right next to it is a picture of the onesie they put on me of the Green Bay Packers when I was coming out of the hospital. But growing up, my idol for the Green Bay Packers was Brett Favre, and he was soon forced to pass that baton to Aaron Rodgers. And their differences bring us to the first reason why we can find when we acknowledge our differences, we actually make each other stronger. Now, Brett Favre did not like Aaron Rodgers one bit when he got there, because Brett Favre was the legendary quarterback who had made 3 MVPs and won a Super Bowl. And he saw this new up-and-coming Aaron Rodgers as a threat to him, never working with him and never helping with him. But soon, Aaron Rodgers decided to reach out to Brett Favre. And through the 3 years that they were both on the Green Bay Packers squad, Brett Favre then began to teach Aaron Rodgers a few things that he has learned about football along the way. And although Brett Favre ended up parting with the Green Bay Packers later, Aaron Rodgers benefited a drastic amount because of this. And Aaron Rodgers continually says that the teaching that Brett Favre has provided him with is extraordinarily exceptional. And as a result, Aaron Rodgers was able to win a Most Valuable Player award himself and lead the Green Bay Packers to yet another Super Bowl championship. As a result, we can see that once Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre acknowledged their differences and worked together to fix them, they became a Hall of Famer and a future Hall of Famer in and of themselves, showing specifically how if we acknowledge our differences, we can create stronger communities together. Now, Alexander the Great is known as perhaps the greatest conqueror in the history of the world, but that almost didn't happen. And that circumstance leads us to the second way. We can find that if we acknowledge our differences, we can become stronger together. See, Alexander the Great started off of the kingdom of Macedonia, occupying relatively the same land that it does today, in and around Greece. And once he had finished his first battle with a nearby city-state, many people thought that it was time for Alexander the Great and Macedonia to sit on its laurels and not advance any further into the rest of their territory. But Alexander the Great had a different interpretation. He wanted to continue to push through, creating the largest empire ever. But rather than just simply not acknowledging his generals' opinions, he used them as allies. Because each individual flaw that they would point out, he only used to strengthen his army and strengthen his cause in fighting against those territories that he wanted so bad. And as a result, Alexander the Great was able to expand Macedonia, conquering most of Europe, most of the Middle East, into Africa, and even Asia, creating the largest empire in the history of the world and occupying almost a majority of the lands that were known at the time. And it's only because he was able to acknowledge those differences that he had with his generals and other people that he got the name tag, the Great. Now, George Washington, despite being our first president, was perhaps considered by many as our best president ever. And it's because he acknowledged people's difference that we can find the third way, that if we acknowledge our differences, we can become stronger together through the examples of George Washington. Now, as soon as he came into office, there were two party groups forming, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. So, as George Washington was an independent, he chose to fill his cabinet with half Democratic Republicans and half Federalists. As a result, not only was he able to reach out to both sides of an aisle that like no other president has before, but George Washington was also able to provide much more consent and advice that he got from his advisors. And he was able to balance policy among the two parties, becoming one of the greatest presidents we've ever known, because he was able to hear that criticism, hear those points of views, accept the differences, and create a stronger country as a whole, showing specifically how, if we acknowledge our differences, we can become better together, through looking at the example of George Washington. Although I may never be our league director, when we look back at today's quote from Audre Lorde, it's not our differences that divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences that do. We can see what she's trying to say here is that if we work together, we can become stronger together. And we saw this through a variety of people, through quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, through Alexander the Great in his conquest, and through President George Washington. And perhaps, maybe my coaches and I can work out a way that we can all create a better league without me being the director.